Welcome to the Modern CPA Success Show, the podcast dedicated to helping accounting firms stay ahead of the curve. Our mission is to provide you with the latest and greatest insights on cutting-edge tools, innovative marketing strategies, virtual CFO services, and alternative billing methods. Join us as we change the way people think about accounting.
Adam, for today's program, we went to an expert around storytelling. I think a lot of people get excited about, but we hear about a lot and it's also hard to implement. What do you think is different about what people are going to listen to today?
It seems very concise, right? It's not overcomplicated. It wasn't conceptual. I think he has some practical tips. He has like 4 main points that he does. And so I thought it was pretty cool. Obviously super relevant to everything that we do. Where I was a little disappointed though, Tom, was he's from Brussels, right?
Uh-huh.
You should have said that so you could set me up so then I could say, how's your sprouts? But I was like, I'm serious. Like I was trying to hold my composure the whole time thinking, when can I land this one? And you just totally let me down.
I'm sorry.
Aside from that, I think listeners will really enjoy his perspective. And again, I think this is really the piece that most people have the hardest time connecting with is like, what do I talk to the clients about? This is where you'll either live or die on the advisory front is this conversation and your ability to turn the numbers into a story.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think we spend a lot of our time sort of everywhere else. And this is a place to spend some serious time and hopefully people get something really good out of this. Great. Well, we hope people really enjoy this. All right. For this episode of the Modern CPA Success Show, we decided to bring an international guest in. At the same time, I think it's a topic that's going to be very much applicable to each of us locally. Let's do quick introductions. I'm Tom Waddleton, a virtual CFO. I am joined by my normal co-host, Adam Hale. Adam, welcome today.
How's it going, Tom?
Doing really well. And then Soufyan Hamid. We are really excited to talk to you, and you are the founder of Finance Circle, and you are financial storytelling, and you're a trainer of that. Would love to hear some of your background that brought you to this, and then want to talk more about storytelling, finance, everything that you do.
Well, first, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you two guys. And I will indeed start by presenting myself. I'm Soufyan. I'm from Brussels, Belgium. And I have a pretty classic background in finance. I started as an auditor at PwC. Then after 4 years, I moved to consulting at Deloitte. And after 4 years again, I joined a telco company as a finance business partner. And this was a shock for me because if technically I had nothing to complain about, I was pretty good in what I did. I prepared dashboards that were flexible and easy to read. I prepared financial models that were appreciated because they allowed a quick and easy decision making. But there was something that was not working as I expected because I didn't have many connections within the company. I didn't have a lot of participations to the important projects. And most of all, I was super frustrated because I thought that with my technical skills, I deserved a promotion quite early. And after 2-3 years of fighting to get these promotions, I finally got the answer why I didn't get those. And this came from the VP Finance self, who during the presentations of the monthly results just told me in those exact words, Soufyan, you're a technician. And you speak to me like I was the same kind of technician, but don't forget that the people who will be in front of me during the presentation are not finance experts. They are business experts, and so they need to know how their business works. So you need to make a business story out of the financials. And when he said that, I understood that I was absolutely no good at it. And so I took it as a challenge and started to train, started to get as much information as I could, started to practice. And this is how I finally got so interested in financial storytelling that I developed my own methodology.
Very cool. Yeah, no, definitely Let's consider this an interview, because I was checking out your website, and this looks really cool. And I think we've talked about this, but we work with a lot of other CPA firms, small, medium, large firms, just like ourselves, delivering virtual CFO services. Well, the key component with virtual CFO services, at least in our offering, is financial forecasting. And it's about collaboration and working with the client, meeting them where they are, all those things that kind of what you're talking about. So for us, we always talk about that, right? So with our clients, we're like, hey, what's going on? This needs to, we need to make sure that we're talking in a way that they can understand it and use the information. And we're not just reading financials off the paper, which is a lot of times what happens. I mean, it's not even super technical. It's just like, hey, you did this and then you did that, and then look at that number. And it's like, well, guys, they can read. That's not the problem. They don't know what to do with the information, right? They don't know what, you've got to highlight what's important, and then you've got to tell them why it's important, and then show them what it looks like to the future. And so whenever I was kind of reading your bio and going through all this stuff, I was super excited because I was like, hey, this is something that we need to have everybody on our team kind of digest and understand, because it's top of mind and something that we talk about all the time in order to really enhance our delivery. So just again, happy you're here, but now, I'd like to just kind of dig in and hear a little bit more about, some of these tips and tricks and things that, people need to do, because if I was looking at this from a consultation standpoint, so now I reached out to you to learn more about the program. Again, for us, I would say my problem is that I've got really good financial people, and they understand the results. Like, they can look at it and they go, oh, this is a good month or a bad month, and they can tell me why. And I can ask them questions, and they can create a story, based on the questions I'm asking. But we need to do that before we go into the call, because the client's like, great, what? So how does this course and some of the things you've learned over the years since that engagement ended, what's that evolution look like? What do we expect inside of here?
Well, I have a concept that I call reverse the narrative. So it's the contrary of what we are used to do in finance, in CFO, in accounting. Generally, we start from our financial reports and we try to explain it. We try to explain the variances with last year, with the budget, if there is any. And so we go through our sequence of the P&L, for example. And the structure of the P&L, you have the revenue, you have the cost of sales, and then you have the OPEX and the different sections of the OPEX. If you do that, not only will it only be relatable to you, but also you will have certainly duplicates, because a business event that has an impact on the revenue will most of the time have also an impact on the cost of sales. Another business event in the OPEX will have an impact also in the revenue. And so if you go through the structure of the P&L, you will certainly start to bore people, because you will say twice or three times the same thing. If you start from the business events, and for that you have to challenge your findings before the consultation and the meeting, but if you start from the business events, then in this case, you will cover the whole P&L with one sentence. And then you can discuss the impacts on revenue, on COGS separately, but at least you will only repeat once the business events that took place and that explain some of the variations. And that's important, because this is what the people in front of us expect. They want what they know. They want to know what they know and the impact it has on their financials, not the other way around.
Right. Instead of just constantly going down the P&L and going, well, but your COGS are off because of the revenue thing that we talked about. And then now your common size factors for, your percentage of rent or overhead are off because, of course, the event, you keep going and, like you said, repeating the same thing over and over and kind of coming back for it. So what I'm hearing you say, just to kind of say it back another way, is just make sure you have the headline. the operational or business event headline for, that's kind of the theme of the call, basically, on the front end, and then you can kind of dig in and support your story from there.
It's important when you have a call, when you have a presentation, to have one big message. If you go there and have one big message, you should be able to say it in one sentence. Of course, we are a people of details, so we give also supporting evidence, we give supporting messages, so you can divide them into sub-messages. But the important is that you should be able, if you had, let's say, 30 seconds instead of 30 minutes, you had 30 seconds to explain what happened during the month. In that case, you should have what we call an elevator pitch. And in this case, it should be in one sentence, being able to say what happened, what the impact is on the business, and what are the next steps. And with these three elements, the what, so what, and now what, the business owner should be able to act upon it. And I insist on that last word because it's one of the most important and forgotten thing of finance storytelling, is that telling the story behind the figures is not about compliance. Telling the story behind the P&L and the balance sheet is not about reporting. It's about triggering an action in the heads of business owners or people in the company, if you are in a bigger company. If you manage to bring them what they need to take a decision, then they get into action. And that's the most important here, because if it's just a reporting, you might as well send a mail and it won't change much. But if you're there in front of them to present and to tell them what happened, you might as well bring some added value in it.
So it's interesting listening to you. That makes so much sense. And I have a hard time saying, why would everyone not agree with you? When you work with, especially accountants doing financial reporting, where's the biggest problem that people seem to have is actually adopting what you're saying? What's the stumbling block that gets us to say, okay, here's why I'm having trouble doing that?
Well, in my consultations and in my trainings, what I observe comes from the accounting background. Because in accounting, you have to be accurate, you have to be complete, you have to take care of every single detail for the simple sake of the double entry concept.
Sure.
The debit has to equal the credit. So you cannot leave a single decimal that's different, because otherwise it doesn't balance. And this search for the perfection makes difficult for finance professionals to think of leaving some details aside. That's the most important, the most difficult I've seen in finance professionals. And I was like that too. For me, it was hard to say that I only explain like 70% of the variance, because I thought that this was important to bring all the 10 little points that I discovered together with the one point that explained the 70%. But you realize that the people in front of you won't care about those little ones, except if you see really something, what we call an insight, is that they will appreciate. But in the other case, they will be more concerned about the little actions that can change their whole business. And so here, our biggest point, our biggest issue is to have the main message out of the sea of data we have.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, and I think that, let's face it, we also like to show off all the hard work we did, right? So there's a lot of hours that go into getting those reports all pumped up, and we're pretty excited. And so we always talk about it with the team. I mean, we've got 60 pages of reports. It's like, nobody cares. Those are for you. You read all that, and then you come up with the story from that reporting, and then you can kind of hop around and highlight some stuff. But I get it. It's really easy to get lost in the details. One, because again, you did do all the work and you feel obligated to kind of show everybody, what you did. And then the other thing is just like the public speaking aspect of it is sometimes a little bit difficult. I mean, it's hard for finance professionals a lot of times. And I think you talk about this a little bit too. You got some tips or tricks for finance professionals in that regard, in terms of even body language and, especially now we're on camera, we're not in front of people all the time in person, those kind of things.
Well, that's for sure. First, before jumping to the body language section and the public speaking section, you said something important, because finance professionals prepare long reports with a lot of details. And for me, there's no problem in doing that, as long as you make the difference between a report that's supposed to be a documentation and visuals that you use during a presentation and the communication that you make out of it. Because those two, although sometimes we use slides, we use PowerPoint for both, well, those two have a different function. The one is supposed to be a depository of the historical information, and that's good, that has a lot of information. And on the other side, you have the communication part, in which you want people to get the message. And the way to get the message is through presentations, public speaking, and body language. And there's only one word that will make the difference. It's practice. It's practice. You have to do it as much as possible. And so my first advice for people who are not used to do that is to find audiences that will be open to have their presentations. Because it's often hierarchical in a company. The CFO will present to the CEO, and then on the other side you will have the finance manager who will present to a director. And so staff people will feel lost and will feel they don't have their place in the storytelling world. But that's not right. That's not true. There are many other layers in a company for which you can push to present the results, because they will be interested too, and it will be a great exercise for you to practice your public speaking, practice your presentation skills, and also practice a different method of storytelling, because you do not present the same way to staff than to executives. They will be completely different, and you have to approach them completely differently. And if you have the chance to present to them, well, here are some tips you can use for a physical presentation, so a presentation in person, and also in a digital presentation. The eyes. You have to look at people. Normally, if you are in front of your computer or even in a room, the reflex would be to look at your slides. And what's the reason behind it? It's because there is too much information on the slides. So you want to remember what there is, and so you look at the slides and you don't have a connection directly with the people. The second one, in terms of public speaking that works both for in-person and digital, is to use your hands. Maybe it's because I have Mediterranean roots, I use my hands a lot, but you do not have to be so exaggerated as myself. But sometimes, and it's even more important in the digital setup, since you don't see the rest of the body, the hands is the only thing that's really moving. So there you can list items, you can speak of time and steps, and with that, you will keep the audience alive and make the presentation more engaging. That's for sure. And for the rest, you have to make it engaging. So make sure that you remain open for questions during the presentation. I know that we've been told at school that the Q&A should come after the presentation, but we are in a business environment and this doesn't work. People want to ask questions on what you've just said and don't want to remember their questions for 20 minutes. So be open to questions and let people participate. If it becomes a discussion, that means that you succeeded to make it an interesting presentation and you made it a story. And that's the most important.
Elevate your firm with a virtual CFO playbook, how to land $60,000 per year clients and provide a killer client experience. This comprehensive online series of modules provides you with the essential tools to create and deliver scalable VCFO services. Developed from Summit's successful approach, which propelled them from $500,000 to over $10 million in revenue in 10 years. This playbook will equip you with the skills to take your firm to the next level. Additionally, upon completion, you can receive 24 hours of CPE credit for the course. Ready to grow your firm? Enroll now at vcfoplaybook.summitcpa.net.
To that point that you just made, I'm wondering, we often talk about what we would like to do when we're having a financial statement discussion with a client, that it's more of a conversation than a presentation. That we think the best piece is when you're really having that interaction, and maybe you're saying the same thing, but I'd be curious your reaction to that, because you're calling it a presentation. And it seems like we're talking some about public speaking. Often when we're with clients, it can be a handful of people, maybe an owner and a couple people you're talking to. So it's a small group. But I wonder your reaction to that. If you go into it as more of a conversation than a presentation, does your advice differ, or do you disagree with that?
No, at least the discussion in a one-to-one discussion would be easier because it's less formal. You have less people to look at. So here, in terms of public speaking stress, you are safer, let's say. But the rest would still apply in terms of communication, what you have to communicate, the structure you have to use to make sure that the people are interested in what you say, the quantity of information, the visuals you use, all those should remain the same. Because when I speak of presentations, not everyone, I would even say almost no one, has a town hall of 100 or 200 people to present to. Most of the time you have a room of maximum 15 to 20 people. And in that case, it's already a big step because you're in front of 20 people, and it doesn't matter digitally or in person, but you are in front of 20 people. And so you have 20 different people to adapt to and to make sure that you anticipate their questions, their way of behaving, their reactions. And so it's a tough work because you want your presentation, and when I say presentation, it's a communication, whatever the format, you want your communication to be successful. And so anticipating questions is also part of it.
You talk too about, and I think that's important, Tom, you're right, the conversation. A lot of times I like to kick off my meetings with that headline that you're talking about. But also, I just turn it back on the client. How's that sound? You know what I mean? Or like, how'd that happen? Or what's going on? And a lot of times, the first 20 or 30 minutes of the meeting, I'm just gaining valuable context that I can then use to like land my argument later, so I can pop to the variances that are important. So I might already know what I want to call out, but I'm trying to create that conversation that first 15 or 20 minutes. Sometimes there's not a whole lot going on, don't get me wrong, and then we have to hop right into it. But sometimes whenever I land, I drop a big bomb on them, like, oh man, this month was terrible because of such and such. What happened? Well, then, now you're going to be sitting there talking for like 30 minutes about something completely different for a little while, and then you can kind of support it. So that's cool. But you also talk about the visual aids, because I think this is important to kind of come back and kind of help as a crutch. So we don't do anything with PowerPoint slides, right? So we're not doing a deck every time we're talking to a client, but we do have a dashboard where we've rolled up and kind of cleaned up the financials a little bit. It's not like it's right out of QuickBooks or, some Excel spreadsheet. But whenever we're showing them that stuff, we do try to minimize or summarize some of the information, but some clients want to see the details. You talk about the visual aid piece as being an ally, or it can be, a nemesis, I guess, if you're showing the wrong stuff. What kind of suggestions do you have for, cleaning that up and really helping letting the visuals, help the narrative a little bit?
Well, it's an interesting example you give, Adam, because visuals can be used for explanatory purposes and exploratory purposes. for exploration, like a dashboard you send to a client, well, he will want to analyze, ask questions about them. And so it's an exploratory concept of dashboards, and there's no problem with it because it's useful and people will appreciate to have the details and ask questions they find interesting. For explanatory, when you already have your message and you already know what points you want to focus on, well, it's important to visually adapt the graphs so that you will focus on the points you want to discuss. So, for example, let's say that you have a bar chart of, I don't know, revenue or EBITDA per month, and 1 month was particularly bad. Well, instead of leaving all in the same color, you might want to gray out all the columns except the bad month. So the attraction of the eye will be direct to the month you want to discuss about. And it's the same for any other graph. You want to ease the reading of the people so that they do not have to analyze the visualizations. Because let's be honest, most people don't know how to read a chart. You have basic charts that are known by most people, but even then, they will not directly see where you want to go with your story. And in the other case, you will even deserve yourself because people might want to observe points you did not want to speak about during your story. So in that case, it's important to adapt the visuals to make sure that they only represent the message you want to bring. If there are two messages, fine. You put 2 bars in colors, but you absolutely want to make sure that the charts you use for storytelling are not the same as the ones for dashboards.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, it definitely makes sense. Like if you were doing like a presentation, go in and basically screenshot or cut away those things that you just want to focus on. And I think that's important. For us, a lot of times because we're dealing with high volume in terms of the number of clients we are, there's a huge time savings in architecting the data so that it's visually presenting everything that we want to discuss. Now, again, I agree with you on the front that if I have 25 dashboards, those are for me, so I use those dashboards. I analyze those dashboards. I figure out what the story is. But then what I try to do is I try to have those 3 or 4 places on those dashboards that I want to take those people to. So I'll be like, okay, so, and, to illustrate that, I want to show you this report, and then I want to show you this one. You know what I mean? I go boom, boom. So I'm like, I'm not giving them, don't get me wrong, like on that page, there might be a little bit more data that they can see, but I'm like circling and kind of pointing to like what I'm trying to get them to. But point taken though. I mean, I think it is important. And I think what you're saying too is, I think a side effect of that I think is really good is preparation. Because if you are taking it to the extent that you just said, you're not just relying on, the dashboards are there and I'll kind of hop around, because we have been told before, sometimes people get too bouncy, you'll bounce around a little too much and clients are like, I wasn't really following at him. He turned on 10 different dashboards. He kept flipping things back and forth. He was going super fast, as opposed to if I would have just taken 3 screenshots and just said boom, 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 and just focused on a still screen. So point taken. I mean, if you have the preparation time and stuff like that, I agree that makes a lot of sense.
But if you know your script, for example, if you know the data points you want to analyze, and that you know it by heart, and that you know how to navigate from one chart to the other, you basically do this job other than visually. The most important is not to leave things gross as they are from Excel or from any other BI tool, and help the reader. And you can help them visually, but you can also help them by clicking on a certain month. And so you will see a month that will be highlighted. It happens in Excel, it happens in Power BI, for example. Well, in that case, you're doing part of the storytelling job. So it's already a quick win.
Yeah. I mean, I think just where my mind always goes is preparation, because don't get me wrong, like there's times whenever I popped into a meeting and haven't looked at anything and I start doing the storytelling. And so and then I start telling, it's almost like a choose your own adventure book. I start telling a story and then I'm like, oh, and then I hear facts or I see something and I go, oh, just kidding. It's because of this, or just kidding. It's because of that, like you catch yourself midstream. So,
Yep.
So everything that you're saying to me as far as like understanding the events and then finding the data that supports the events and then pulling that out, to me just really focuses in on the need for, if you're going to be a good storyteller, you better know how the story ends, right? Like, so don't try to read the book together. You should have probably already read the book before you go and try to explain it to the client. So yeah, I just I really like the idea of the preparation component of what you're suggesting. So is that something that you kind of focus on in the course? What are the main focal points or the kind of cornerstones? Because again, for us, we can say these things to our team. We're always talking to them. We're like, hey, it's really important to be a storyteller. We actually brought in, I don't know if you know Peter Margaritis or not, but take the num out of numbers. He's like teaching you how to story tell and kind of create story out of the numbers, kind of similar to what you're talking about. But again, that was, and it's great, and it's more conceptual. But what I'm seeing from your course is it's more, you're showing us more tactically, again, which might appeal more to our accountant brain of like, oh, okay, this is exactly how to kind of focus that on. So what are those cornerstones in the, trying to teach our team how to do those kind of things?
Well, you said so many things that it's really great because I have to jump on each of them. Well, you directly saw the main difference between my methodology and most storytelling courses we see, because it's adapted by a finance guy. I work in finance and I know how it works, and so I didn't want to bring all these Hollywood stories concepts into my storytelling course because it did not make sense in our environment. And so, to jump on the second thing you said, what I made sure was to divide my course into 4 steps, and all those steps are preparation. You have to prepare first a message. While most people start with preparing their slides, normally when you analyze your figures, you should be able to tell what you want to bring out of your data. So at month end, when you close the books, you analyze your data and you want to analyze certain data points, challenge them with business people, get additional and contextual information. And so you prepare a message, because only when you have a message, you can prepare, and that's the second step, a story. You prepare this story by using structures that are adapted to the audience. And so this is what I said earlier about staff people, what we call experts, who will need a specific type of storytelling structure. And you have executives who will need another type of storytelling. In most cases, executive will want the conclusion before any other detail. And so, Adam, what you said about saying first the message is working for executives, but sometimes for lower people in the hierarchy, they first need to be convinced before accepting a conclusion. So you have to build the trust before sharing your conclusion. And that was the step 2. And only after that, when you know what to say and how you will say it, then you prepare your slides. And when I say slides, it's more slides that you show during your presentation, not the reports that you send, because for that, you are free to put any other details you want, because those have a different function. But those slides you use as a visual during your presentation have to respect certain rules to catch the attention, to be digestible, and to show and to provoke an emotion in people so that they listen to you They are not too focused on the slide, but enough so that the catchy messages still remain in their heads. And only after that, you have to practice. And that's the fourth step, prepare yourself. And this is where I teach people how to improve their public speaking, how to use their body language, how to rehearse, how to give a digital presentation. All those concepts that work today are important because you might have the best message and the best story possible. If it's delivered poorly, it will not have the same effect. That's for sure. Because imagine a movie with a great scenario, but with a $1,000 budget. It will not work. So you have to imagine your story like that. And so, yeah, these 4 steps are the cornerstones of my training program, because with that, you cover all the pain points I got from the CFOs I interviewed in these last years. Because I had the opportunity to speak to many CFOs, more than 35, and there were 5 main recurring items that came in their complaints about the presentations they got from their teams. The first one was the absence of a main message. The second one was the absence of tailoring the presentation to the audience. So we used the same presentation for all audiences. The third one was that there was no use of narrative. So we just go through the P&L as we know it, and then we jump to the balance sheet and we jump to the cash flow. And so storytelling was not existing. The slides, well, you know the reputation of slides of finance, so I guess.
Sure.
I don't have to paint a picture. And then the fifth one was that since we spend so much time on preparing the slides, people do not practice before the presentation, and so they feel stressed. They do not convince the people in front of them. And this is an important point, because we might think that because financial information is the truth, we do not have to convince people. But it's not the case. We have to convince them. They have their reality. They do not always think that one of their actions has a financial impact. And so you have to go into their mind to make sure that they follow you along. And that goes only with a great communication and somehow a performance.
How long does that prep time take? I mean, so I'm trying to think of our own team, Tom, like we always talk about, hey, like the best thing we can do is think about our clients. But the reality is we have limited time. I mean, and obviously I understand that at first it's going to take a little bit of time to, get into a rhythm and understand that kind of stuff. But at stable state, how long do you think it should take you to do those things that you just kind of mentioned? And maybe it depends on the size of the data and that kind of stuff, but just small to medium sized business.
No, sure. I think that when you are really used to storytelling, to practicing, to structuring your thoughts, it can go quite fast. I think that by rehearsing once or twice, and it will be as long as your presentation. So 20 to 30 minutes, because don't forget, your presentation or your communication will be more a discussion. So that means that there will be back and forth, and in a slot of 60 minutes, you will have a talk time of 20 to 25 minutes, but then you will have questions, you will have answers, you will have the discussion. So basically, if you prepare your slides and your story and your analysis, which is part of the normal stuff, preparing yourself takes up to 40 minutes, like 1 hour. So each month you can block 1 hour. It can be significantly a game changer for you.
I think so. I mean, even just that preparation going into a meeting, if you know that story, you know how it ends, you know what you're going to show them. I mean, Tom, I know we've had this conversation many times. Just the feeling is, I mean, not only does the client feel it, but you do too. It's just like, you just feel like you just nailed that presentation. So
Yes.
there's a big difference. So again, I think the structured presentation that you're talking about and the methodology for that, I mean, it has me sold. I mean, for sure. Like again, because we talk about all of it all the time, and I think people get the conceptual piece of storytelling, but I think whenever it comes to practical examples, it's really hard for people to kind of articulate, oh, that's what you meant, or okay, how would you handle it in this situation? So I'm looking forward to the course, just to kind of hear a little bit more about, diving in and seeing some of those examples, and hopefully that'll help land the plane a little bit with the team, so they can kind of see, hey, this is how to kind of handle those kind of things. And so excited about that.
Soufyan, can you talk a little bit about the course? If someone wants to take it, approximately how long does it usually take them to go through, seeing results, kind of what should people expect if, hopefully this has intrigued them and said, yep, this applies to me and I could get better at this.
Well, the course is about 2.5 hours of videos that are divided into small videos, because I don't want people to lose focus. When you are online, it's always difficult to keep the focus. So small videos that in total give more or less 2.5 hours. And since I said earlier, practice is the key, well, you have approximately more or less the same time practice. So in total, you have 4.5 hours of training, in which you have videos to watch and in which there are interactions, but you also have exercises with a use case that I use from the P&L that I invented. So it's a telco company, but I could change it. And this
it was your former company. That's okay.
I adapted.
I know how that works.
I didn't want to share confidential information, so I invented everything. But no, in this case, it's 2.5 videos, 2 hours training, and I like it to be a bit fun. So it's not only an Excel file you have to download and work on it. I prepared also games inside the course. So you have a game with the drag and drop. You also have a game in which you get to see your business partners to challenge your findings. You get to see other people to observe the audience. So it's kind of interactive. I try to be quite innovative on how it works, because online courses are not always the most interesting. But in this case, I try to make it as fun as possible so that you could not only learn and improve your skills, but also have a good time.
It does sound fun. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
No, it does. And I think that, again, this just seems pretty universal. I mean, if you're delivering this kind of a service, and I mean, it doesn't even have to be, because what you were talking about too, whenever you're talking about variances and P&L, the one piece that we didn't really get into a whole lot was on the financial planning side. So the other aspect of ours is we tell people, hey, you talked about 20 minutes of presentation time. We're usually telling people, hey, 5-10 minutes to get through the performance stuff, the analysis of what happened, and then spend equal amount of time telling about what that does to the future, right? So we're doing both FP&A pieces, right? So we're doing the financial planning and the analysis. We just kind of start with the analysis and then go into the planning. That's kind of our conversation so we're trying to make that. And I think everything else you were saying kind of lands well with kind of the timing, 60 minutes, you want to be half discussion, half presentation. That sounds pretty accurate to what we pitch for and we try for.
Yeah.
The planning part is the part in which the storytelling takes all sense, because you basically sell something that still didn't take place. It didn't happen yet. So you speak about the future, and this is where you have to have business events, business assumptions to make sure that people go along, because most of the time, this is where you will also have a lot of challenge. When you present a budget, for example, or a forecast, you have people who might take them quite heavily, because sometimes when you speak of a specific product that doesn't go well, well, the responsible of said product will not be happy about it. And so you have to transform it into a story so that he's not an enemy, but more an ally, and that will go through the collaboration before.
Yeah. Well, I mean, good advice.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Well, Soufyan, this has been excellent. Like I said at the beginning, I think most people would agree. Yep, this is needed. Anytime you're kind of hearing, hey, do it in a story form people like. Yet it's hard, and I think you point out some of the reasons for people in the finance profession why it's really hard. And love that you had the steps and then the course that can help people to do that. So really appreciate you sharing that with us today.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Hope everyone has a fantastic day.
Yeah. Take care.
Have a nice
Thanks.
day. Bye.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website, summitcpa.net, to get more tips and strategy for achieving modern CPA firm success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.